Okay, my friends, it is Wednesday, December 18th, and I have four big stories for you today. So we're going to start here with Douglas Macgregor breaking rumors emerging that NATO and CIA were heavily involved in the assassination of top Russian General Igor Kirillov in Ukraine. Well, where is he getting that kind of thing with this breaking news? It's because of the information bubble that he surrounds himself in, and you can find that sort of thing if you read Sputnik, where Sputnik was putting out, and I talked about that this morning, that Kyiv orchestrated the murder of Kirillov as payback for hurting major financial interests tied to the Pentagon-run Ukraine biolab scheme. Really? Like, that's what it is? Sputnik is also putting out stuff like this. Nobody compares to Putin, the world's only leader who holds live nationwide Q&As. Well, not only is that factually incorrect, because U.S. presidents do this all the time. They have press conferences where they do a Q&A. But he also probably knows the answers ahead of time of what's going to be asked. So, okay, let's turn our attention here with this. What happened with the general? A general is eliminated by what looks like the SBU or some special forces or something from Ukraine. And this guy is the fall guy. He's an Uzbek citizen born in 1995 who allegedly planted an explosive device in an electronic scooter parked near Kirillov's building entrance. They didn't target civilians. They only targeted the general and his major, both of them uniformed personnel of the Russian military. So was this tea? No, this was a legitimate thing. Okay, let's shift gears and start talking about big story number two. So Tucker Carlson is defending the deposed Syrian dictator. I keep trying to get away from Syria, and I just can't get away from the story with Syria. Okay, the deposed Syrian dictator who murdered and hundreds of thousands of Syrians. Why am I required to hate Assad, he asks. Okay, so this looks like a legitimate news interview where what Tucker does is he asks questions to get the other side, the person on the other side, to answer what he wants him to answer. He doesn't push back against it, which is what most journalists do. They push back against whatever the person's saying to see if there's like anything there. Here he is talking with Jeffrey Sachs.
But I never understood, what I didn't understand and still don't understand is why we're all required to hate Assad. I mean, not just speaking for myself, I don't have strong feelings about Assad one way or the other.
So Assad murdered tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of his own people. And I'll show you the evidence for that in just a moment. But how do you not see him as a bad guy?
Apparently he's protected the Christians, so I'm grateful for that as a Christian. But why am I required to hate Assad? Tulsi Gabbard went and met with Assad. She's been attacked ever since. Is anyone ever explained why?
There's a reason for that, because she's cuddling up to someone who is maybe less than someone that you should be cozying up to.
Why Americans should hate Assad?
Because every regime change operation we ever do, we have to make sure that the opponent is the worst villain since Hitler or Hitler reincarnate.
Some ophthalmologists.
Okay, so wait a minute. This is not a regime change operation that we do. That's the difference here. And what? He's a bad guy. Can't you admit that there are bad guys?
From London is a bloodthirsty dictator. I didn't really.
We have to say this, and this is part of the psyops or the info war that goes along with regime change operations. This is completely typical.
Okay, but that's not what's going on. So let's talk about what's going on here. Tucker's just asking questions. Oh, really? Is that so? He's not pushing back. And if he was pushing back, like I'm about to, he'd be bringing up articles like this. Here, Syria under Assad, torment and, well, I'm not going to say the other word. Okay, in 2013, death in Syria was arbitrary as it was brutal. 2 years into the civil war, murder crept through the suburb of Damascus in a suffocating haze. I'm reading CBS News, right? It was sarin gas, outlawed in 1997. Sarin has no color, no odor. Often the dead drop, never knowing what happened. The nerve gas that killed more than 1,400 civilians that year was delivered by Syrian army rockets from land then held by Assad. Cameras captured the moment as one father held the bodies of his dead daughters, young girls he had willed through months of hunger. Do you know what they said before going to sleep? He asked, his voice breaking. I gave her food. She said, Dad, it's not my turn to eat. It's my sister's. This is what's going on under Assad. Over the years, starvation and shelling continued, forcing 13 million Syrians from their homes, and in 2017, another chemical attack. The Assad dictatorship is essentially clearing out any part of the country that it cannot control, 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Peely reported in 2018. One group of Syrians made hope their mission, volunteer rescue workers known as the White Helmets. When Assad's dictatorship dropped bombs, the White Helmets jumped in to try to save civilians buried in the rubble. At one point in the war, they were responding to an average of 35 attacks per day. Throughout the war, the White Helmets say they saved more than 128,000 civilians. And yet Tucker's asking, why am I required to hate Assad? Is he really a bad guy? Well, yeah, he's really a bad guy. Here's Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a leader of the Russian opposition. From March 2018 to September 2019, the Syrian central bank secretly sent 21 plane loads of over $250 million in cash to Russia, nearly 2 tons of $100 and €500 notes, supposedly for wheat, military aid, and services, but the timing was suspicious. Import-export documents were drawn up for these shipments while he's stealing this from his people. So he's not only murdering them, but he's stealing from them. While cash is being transferred, Wagner mercenaries were in Syria, helping to prop up the Assad regimes, because it's all connected. During the same period, the cash was sent to Russia. Close associates of Assad were buying luxury apartments in Moscow between 2013 and 2019. They spent more than $40 million on the properties. Family members own apartments in nearby Federation Tower. The property was purchased in 2019 when the cash flights from Syria to Russia were at their peak. Perhaps a coincidence, but the timing certainly raises questions. So he's not only murdering, but stealing from his own people. And yet, Tucker's asking, is he really a bad guy? While Sachs is blaming the CIA because that's what they do before they try to have a regime change, which we weren't part of. Now, Vlad Vexler said something interesting. Jeffrey Sachs has lost the plot epistemologically. Don't mock this. When people of his caliber lose themselves in the informational environment, that's pretty scary, and it shows how easy it is for ordinary citizens to lose themselves without realizing it. Now, he's an intelligent guy, but his view of the world is so skewed that these guys can't agree that Assad's a bad guy? It's astounding to me. Now, I keep telling you that it's all connected. A food truck stolen by Russians in Ukraine has been spotted in Syria. The truck has an inscription in Ukrainian, which means food. Like, it's all connected. Now, there are real consequences. The UN General Assembly adopts a resolution addressing human rights violations in all Ukrainian territories under Russian occupation, including Crimea and Sevastopol. For the first time, the UN resolution officially characterizes Russia's actions as a war of aggression against Ukraine. The resolution condemns T of Ukrainian POWs, which a high percentage, like 9 out of 10 Ukrainian POWs experience T. Illegal detention of Ukrainian civilians, the deportation of children, and discrimination against residents in the occupied territories. The document was supported by 81 countries. 80 countries abstained. 14 countries voted against it. Well, who were the 14 countries? Belarus, Burkina Faso, Burundi, China, Cuba, North Korea, Eritrea, Iran, Mali, Nicaragua, Niger, Russia, Sudan, and Zimbabwe. Like, all of Russia's friends are there. 14 countries. And 80 countries abstained. They weren't willing to join the 81 countries, even though it's a meaningless UN resolution. Okay, let's turn our attention to what's going on in the Russian economy, which is basically management malpractice. Bonds of the largest Russian developer, Samolet, continue to fall, and default is very close. The Russian economic headlines just keep getting worse. Russian real estate prices are expected to drop by 50% over the next year. Why? Because the market is that bad. A double-decker passenger train collided with a freight train in the Murmansk region in Russia. The accident occurred near Kodova station. The passenger train was traveling on Murmansk-St. Petersburg route. Now, it could have just been an accident, but my guess is that there's some mismanagement that's causing this. And part of the reason that I'm guessing that is, here, one of Russia's largest companies, Russian Railways, misses its 2024 profit target by a staggering 90%. Net profit, instead of the planned 122 billion rubles, will only amount to 15 billion rubles. They're mismanaging the country in almost every sector. Beijing is courting Putin, but Chinese shoppers are revolting against Russian goods, revealing how consumers could dent the Kremlin's war ambitions. They don't want cheap Russian stuff in China. Think about that. Russia's corporate bond sector continues to collapse as the price Russian companies pay to borrow money heads into the stratosphere, almost 3 times what it was 1 year ago. So the higher a corporate bond is to borrow, the worse the economy is doing. It's a greater than 27.5, and a year ago it was at about 8. So something's very bad with the Russian economy. Russian MP Mironov accused Russia's central bank of inflation and the rising key rate. They are looking for a scapegoat to blame for the problems in the Russian economy. It's bad, but the Russian economy its problems are from the war. The central bank assures us that there is no other way to fight inflation than to raise the discount rate. He doesn't want that because that's making it hard for business. A question for Ms. Nabiulina. Ms. Nabiulina, since July last year, you have started raising the discount rate. How much has inflation increased? By 2 times. Hey, Mrs. Nabiulina, are you adequate or not? What the blank are you saying? What are you talking about? So he's not happy about what's going on there. So Russia's economy is in bad shape, but it's in bad shape because it keeps trying to gobble up its neighbor. And this is nothing new. This is a map from 1877 depicting Russia as an octopus that's gobbling up its neighbors. That's what Russia tends to do. Here's another cartoon from almost 100 years ago. The United States and England are standing by as Russia is whipping Ukraine. And this is nothing new. This is how authoritarian dictators act, whether it's Assad or Putin. Now, the parody site Darth Putin says, anti-imperialists, please note, U.S. bases abroad are bad, and their bombing causes tea. Russian bases abroad are good, and our bombing causes joy to the fortunate victims. Sure it does. Now, even I feel icky after listening to all that, so I want to leave you with this thought. Whenever I'm feeling down, I just remind myself that $1 trillion worth of propaganda didn't work on me. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.